Okay, this is Block 8, Pax Americana, Section 3, Problems in Asia, with this section, French Indochina. Let's orient ourselves first on a map of Asia. Here's Asia, the Soviet Union, China, Japan would be here, here are the Philippines. French Indochina is this little corner, the southeast corner of Asia. And it was a French colony since the 19th century that today, here's a map of the entire French colony. It today includes the nations of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. During World War II, the Vietnamese joined with Japanese forces to throw out the French and win independence for Vietnam. Then they fought against the Japanese, who did not want the Vietnamese being independent. After the war ended, the French came back and attempted to reassert control over their colony. So this is what we have set up. We have the French being kicked out by the Japanese and the Vietnamese, the Japanese taking over Vietnam, the Vietnamese fighting the Japanese, and then after Japan leaves, France comes back. All of this fighting by the Vietnamese is led by this man. This is Ho Chi Minh. He started out a nationalist and became a communist. His forces would see the Japanese, French, and Americans all quit Vietnam before it was truly one united country. He is the father of modern Vietnam, and what you see on the left are his troops. These are the Viet Minh. They start out as nationalists, but as time goes on, they become increasingly communist guerrilla fighters under the strategic, and you almost have to say genius, of Ho Chi Minh, the the Vietnamese nationalist and later communist leader. The first thing that he has to do, Ho, that is kick out the French. And what the French are obviously trying to do is retain control of their colony. And what the French are engaged in heavy fighting in Vietnam for a long time. From 1945 to 1954, for those 9 years, the French are fighting in Vietnam. And they ask the United States for military and financial assistance. The United States is unwilling to provide military assistance, but since the French say that they are fighting a communist insurrection, the United States is very happy, or not very happy, but willing at least, to pay for the French effort in Southeast Asia. By 1954, the American taxpayer is paying for 80% of France's war in Vietnam. The French leader, who was quite an effective leader, kind of had a bad 1954. His son was killed in action, and then he got cancer and died, which left the French underfunded, underconfident, and underwhelmed with their job in the jungle. What the last thing they tried to do, and they thought this would really work for them, was establish a base at a place called Dien Bien Phu. Dien Bien Phu is up here in the northern part of the country, and it controls much of the supply leading into the Vietnamese capital of Hanoi. And the French built this supposedly impregnable fortress with an airstrip and dozens of forts and bases, and it was supposed to be a place deep in the jungle where they could launch air raids from, and the Viet Minh could not attack them back. However, Ho Chi Minh brought his troops through the jungle, dragging artillery pieces behind them, and besieged the fortress. That literally the French woke up one day and there was artillery on the hills around them that they did not expect to happen. And the Vietnamese began to besiege the fortress. And the fighting was bloody, desperate, and terrible. That in Dien Bien Phu was the famous French Foreign Legion, those volunteers from all around the world who offer to fight for France, and they are fighting for their lives against the equally determined Viet Minh. The French government, which is a weak government to begin with, begs President Eisenhower for help. Eisenhower refuses. Eisenhower says, we'll continue to provide funding, but no American troops are going to be sent to Vietnam. Eventually, the fortress at Dien Bien Phu holds out for weeks, but eventually the defenders are exhausted, overwhelmed, and forced to surrender. And as part of the surrender, all the French forces had to leave French Indochina, had to leave Vietnam. So peace talks were then set up. French Indochina was divided into 4 countries. Laos and Cambodia became pro-Western, became countries with pro-Western monarchies. Vietnam was divided in half. Vietnam was divided in half. That Ho Chi Minh and his communists were given the north part of Vietnam, north of the 17th parallel of latitude. That this became the realm of Ho Chi Minh and his communists in North Vietnam. It was divided at the 17th parallel. South Vietnam was where the communists were much less strong. The communists were very strong and very popular in the north, less so in the south. So a separate nation was created in the southern part of Vietnam, known as South Vietnam, with its capital at Saigon, led by anti-communist authoritarian Ngo Dinh Diem. And that's Ngo Dinh Diem, was the authoritarian anti-communist leader of South Vietnam. This was all in 1954, the division. Elections were supposed to be held in 1956 throughout the entire country, but those elections were canceled by Diem due to the fact that the communists would probably win. They were better organized, and their power in the north and their terror campaign in the south would lead to a communist victory. So Diem canceled the elections and ruled as a dictator. Eisenhower, and after him President Kennedy, promised military aid for South Vietnam against the North in exchange for pro-democratic reforms that Diem would undertake. But Diem was very slow, and very slow is a nice way to put it, about his reforms. And in order to kind of help Diem and his military hold off the North Vietnamese and the communists, by Kennedy's administration, there are already American advisors, military advisors, which means troops, helping the South Vietnamese in Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam. So by 1962, this is set up, this whole tragedy that's going to become the Vietnam War. We have a country, Vietnam, divided in half, a communist north, led by Ho Chi Minh, a non-communist south, led very poorly by the dictator Diem, supported by American military advice, although there are no troops, no fighting troops, no combat troops on the ground yet. But the stage is set for the tragedy that's going to be known as the Vietnam War.